Fireball Island is a true classic of the 1980s. It is one of the most iconic games of that period. It came with that gigantic plastic board. There was a single piece, then made for a huge box. I used to play the game back in the day. I own a copy now, which actually I bought recently. I lost my original one, and pretty much it takes up a shelf just by itself. It is a game that was that you thought it was excellent, and that's the way it is. You thought so because you were much younger. It was a game that actually was aimed mainly at kids, I believe. Sometimes parents would patiently sit around the board to play, but you remember possibly a great game. You remember a game full of fun, of crazy moments, fireballs rolling against your enemies. From time to time they hit you, and that was even that was fun. I was like, oh no, crazy moments. In truth, it was a very lacking game, I believe. Even back then, I had a period, because I used to play, in which I loved it because of the action, until, unfortunately, we discovered that the game was completely broken. I don't know if anybody else found that problem. I haven't seen people sharing that online, but maybe I've been playing it wrong back then. But it seemed at a certain point they really didn't need to go to the diamond to get the diamond, which of course completely destroyed the game. Since the only victory condition in the old game was to get the diamond and get out of the island, instead of going there, you could just sit by the boat and wait for somebody to go and do it. So if everybody did that, then the game was totally unplayable. If somebody went to get the diamond, then it became a totally random game to the last 4 or 5 die rolls to see who was able to leapfrog whom and who was able to steal the diamond from whom. So basically it turned either unplayable or a completely random game that was 4 or 5 die rolls after somebody went all the way there, and that totally destroyed the fun. Hashtag sad. Now, the game has been remade with a 21st century sensibility, adding a lot of things that we like these days, such as more ways to score points, more paths to victory, a board with more things that you can do, reduce randomness. The game is not a roll and move now anymore. It is a card-driven game in which you don't have full control where you go, and you shouldn't. Still fun to end up in front of a fireball, and you can't help it, just waiting for the next turn, hoping that you can get the heck out of there. So the game has been remade pretty much to appeal now, not just to children, but also to a 21st century adult audience. I would say the game has been remade so that you as an adult can play the game that you remember playing, which is not necessarily the game that you were playing. So that a game that, well, it captures that fun that you had. Now, without further ado, let me show how the game works. So the game is played on this beautiful plastic diorama that, since the original game came out in the 1980s, has remained the iconic element, the centerpiece of the entire experience, obviously, and for good reason. There we have Vul-kar that can rotate just like he did in the original game, but as you can see, there are 3 places that the fireballs can come out of, which makes him a lot more interesting. Sadly, in the original game, basically, I'm sorry for the heresy, but he was kind of like useless, because once you put him in the direction where you wanted the ball to go, there was no difference in dropping the ball in Vul-kar or just pushing it down that path. Speaking of other innovations, now we have these palm trees that have those roots, and they can be rotated so that you can create protections for your characters. Maybe you're gonna be behind one of those roots, hoping that the fireballs will go in a different directions, or you're turning them around to try to direct the fireball against one of your opponents, and that is cool. You have a more intricate net of paths that you had before, with more places to go, more ways where you can get hit by fireballs. Also, the fireballs have more places where they can go now. There is an added dexterity element, as opposed to the previous fireballs were a lot more constrained. Like this one can go in 1 or 2 directions. I can send it there. or I could have sent it somewhere else. This one I can send here, or I can just push actually any direction I want. So I can even, you cannot flick it, you have to push it, but you can really try to get lucky because you're allowed to push them in absolutely any direction, and that is great fun. It follows the general idea of this game of adding choices, adding agency for the players. The caves, there is a system of 6 number spots. Here is a number 3. I don't know if you can see that with the glare. There is a 3 written there. There is a 2 here. Maybe the 2 is a little easier to read. And there is a 6-sided die, which however only shows numbers between 1 and 3. So you have 6 caves, each with a number between 1 and 3 represented twice. In the original game, when you enter the cave, you roll a die to see in which space you came out, but that was so random. Well, there was only one chance in 6 to go where you wanted to go. The people actually almost never used it. You had to be pretty desperate to use it. Now you have a little more control. It becomes more of a more appetizing possibility. Then you have these tokens here that you spread around the island face up in designated positions, and those are little treasures that you collect, and different from the original game. Now they will score in a set collection type of thing. Having a lot of the same kind is better than having a bunch of different kinds. Plus, we have spaces on the board with these icons here. They represent snapshots that the players will be taking. If your game piece stops, lands, or moves through a space like that, you will take the corresponding snapshot card as coded by those numbers there. They're worth 5 points each at the end of the game, which is not a small thing when you consider that the diamond, the famous diamond, is only 7. Only 7 is good, but if you consider in the original game that was the only thing that allowed you to win the game, the victory condition was based entirely on who controlled the diamond. Well, now you have a lot more paths to victory. Also, when a certain number of snapshot cards have been collected, that may trigger the end of the game. Another thing is that there will be a number of marbles that are added here to the scar, which is this grove here. Players play cards to activate their characters. Some cards are cataclysm cards, will allow you to drop balls in Vul-kar's head, and after you play a cataclysm card, you place it there as a record of how many have been played. When 3 of them have been played, that is when you take a red ball from the supply and you put in the grove. Now the next time that the cataclysm strikes, you will drop them all in there and see what happens. There's a ladder that may be bumped. There are bridges that if you're standing on them, you're not gonna stand on them after the fireball goes through them. So a lot of different things may happen. Again, the end of the game may be triggered when a number of fireballs are in the scar. When that happens, the players only have a number of turns to come back to the helipad, and the players that are there at the actual end of the game, they'll be able to score everything that they have. And also there is a quote-unquote lucky penny, which is a treasure that sits there next to the helipad. For a player that goes back to the helipad, they can choose to grab one of those. Actually, for scoring, here we have from the back of the rulebook, this is what scores. At the end of the game, you count points from all possible sources, and the player with the most points wins the game. So now a lot of different paths to victory. You can score those points in so many different ways. As for gameplay, you have a hand of 2 action cards that will give you a movement value and possibly other stuff. There is a deck of souvenir cards that will allow you to perform special actions, to gain certain advantages or to get certain protections. The general idea is that you choose one of the cards that you have in your hand, you play it, you move the corresponding number of spots. You have to move the number of spaces, but at least you can choose the direction in which you want to go. There is a path you can choose where you want to go, as long as you don't go back and cover the same spaces on which you move this turn. And so, for example, I want to move this character by 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and that would be it for that movement. You can move over routes without any problem. If there are areas like that one, that is a brown area, you can simply skip it, leapfrog it. Like in the original game, you cannot stop in the same space as another player, and actually as you move, you don't count their space, you just keep moving, so that pretty much effectively gives you a moving discount. Other things, some cards again will allow you to drop balls, fireballs in Vul-kar's head, and from there on other people's heads. When you get that symbol after you can rotate something, which means you can rotate Vul-kar. As you can see from the star-shaped base, there's only a specific number of discrete positions in which Vul-kar can go, or you can rotate the roots of one of the trees on the island. And that's actually pretty much the general idea. You play a card. After you play a card, you draw another card. Oh yes, if you are hit by a fireball dropped by another player, then you had to give them a treasure that you're carrying. If you knock yourself over with a fireball that you release, totally possible, then you still lose a treasure, goes in a general pool that players can draw from at the end of the game. When they reach the helipad, players cannot steal regular treasures from each other as they, well, I would say as they use in the original game. In the original game, you could steal the diamond from each other by leapfrogging the person that has it. You can still do that, but the diamond is the only thing that can be stolen. These are the treasures, and not stolen by leapfrogging, but they're stolen by torching your friends alive. So now a lot of different movements are available, lots of different interactions. The players will run around the island collecting treasures and snapshots and still trying to avoid fireballs and still unleashing fiery destruction over each other. But there are just so many different ways in which you can win by scoring different points. Continue like this until the end of the game is triggered, reach the helipad or not, and then you score as many points as you can, and if you have more points than anybody else, you win the game. To me, misremembering is half of nostalgia. And, you know, I, for example, really like the new Star Wars movies better than the original ones, and that seems heretical. But that's the way I see things. Maybe because I remember rather than misremembering the original trilogy. The same happens with Fireball Island here, because I have such mixed memories, by the way, precisely because I have memories of one of the games that I preferred until it turned into one of the games that was one of the bitterest disappointments. And even if the game wasn't broken the way I described, there's still just so much randomness, which by the 1980s was okay because that was still the standard. We hadn't reached the renaissance of board gaming that we are inhabiting now. We didn't have that quantum event that brought game design to become so much better. It was a flawed game in an age of flawed games, of games full of randomness, of minimal decisions. But the game now is so much better. I like the new game, Fireball Island, Curse of Vul-kar, better than the original one from any point of view. And you can really see point by point how it has been changed to appeal to the kind of game that we like now. Again, with more agency, with less randomness, with multiple paths to victory, with more control from the point of view of the players, with more chances for planning. It's just so much better from any and every point of view. Now you have an element of set collection, you have different ways of scoring, which leads you to more interesting decisions. You could go for the snapshot. which of course may be very dangerous, or just patiently collect a lot of little treasures, but not all treasures are born equal. Therefore, now you want to collect a set rather than just a salad of different treasures. The take that element is still there, but it has been reduced. I would say it has been done right, because they take that element of pushing or throwing or directing fireballs at your opponent is still there, and it really is the heart of the game, and that pure fun is still there. The constant stealing from leapfrogging has been reduced now. That was the quote-unquote the wrong take that, which also added even more complete randomness, because I tried to steal from you, but I roll 1, you try to steal from me and you roll 6, you do succeed and you're far from me, and I'm doomed. You could still do that now, but when the jewel does not much more worth than other things, and you can score more points doing other things, than was the big deal. And I like also how you can manipulate the end of the game by collecting a certain number of snapshots and then, well, quote unquote, figuring things out. And then maybe you collect the last snapshot when it's best for you, when the opponents are far from the helipad, when you seem to be ahead, and so you want to shut down the game. It is just so much better from any point of view. It really has become a 21st century game, a 21st century design, not just published now, but with this new philosophy based on the great renaissance of board gaming that we are experiencing. So I like it a lot. From the point of view of production also, finally you can store it in a box with a reasonable size. It's not that easy actually to store it back in the box. The box had just been an inch bigger, deeper. That would have been better, but with some little bit of pretending that you're playing a three-dimensional puzzle, then you can definitely figure it out. The trees and the roots, great addition, great fun moving them around. If one thing, maybe I would have liked a little more cards that allow you to move things around, to rotate things. There are enough, but there are several, but there are just so many of these trees that do so many things that can alter the landscape of the board so much that I wish there were even more ways of playing with them, or you could do that more often. Still, being able to turn a trap and then maybe it will be triggered, maybe not, is great fun. Uncertainty has been added in the way the Vul-kar pukes out fireballs, basically, as you cannot rely on the old idol to be as precise as it used to be. But again, I would say it's the right kind of randomness, because it keeps things interesting and it increases the chances that you will torch your own character instead of other people's characters, which may be frustrating, but in a game that is this light, so much fun. So definitely a light game, one for families, one that if you are a hardcore gamer that only plays hardcore games, then I don't think you're going to enjoy this one all that much. But even for hardcore gamers, then it's more similar to the kind of games that we play these days than the original was. It's fun, it's light, it's simple, it's silly. There's a lot to like in here, and it can be definitely an interesting diversion also for gamers, not only for gamers with children or children and families. Vul-kar, or Fireball Island, Curse of Vul-kar. It is, to me, the game that you thought you were playing back in the day, and you can play it now, but now you can play it for real, which to me is a really good thing.